I think people are slowly making their way back from breakout rooms. It looks like everybody's coming back this direction, slowly but surely. Welcome back, everyone. Hope no one got sucked back too soon before you got to exchange good details. Let me make sure we get everyone back. Oh, it says 5 seconds. Here we go, y'all.
Recording.
Welcome back, everyone. I hope everybody got to know each other a little bit more. We are so glad that we can welcome so many great guests tonight to share more about our work. And I'll kick it to Juan to continue taking us on our fantastic journey tonight.
Welcome, everyone. Hope that and thanks, Tatiana, for the segue there. I hope that everybody had a chance to catch up with old colleagues, maybe meet a few new faces. Really appreciate you guys' time this evening to join us as we wrap up October. We also wrap up our virtual happy hours of the year. And I think it's going to be an exciting opportunity for us to learn more a little bit about storage from three ladies that are based here in Austin that are definitely leaders in the space. And I think that now is a really good opportunity to make sure that all sorts of curiosities that you might have are answered, as well as, just staying up to date as to what we're going to be doing in terms of our events as an organization forward for the remainder of the year. So I guess starting off with our usual, we want to thank our sponsors that have made it possible for us to be present and to grow as an organization. FTC Solar and Recurrent Energy, both work in the utility space, are stellar sponsors. Our Megawatt sponsors, Orsted, Mayfield, Yotta, Downtown Alliance, and Fractal. Important to recognize that Judy McElroy has been so gracious to add herself to the list of Megawatt sponsors representing Fractal, and Jenniffer works for Yotta. So thank you both for supporting the organization. To our Gigawatt sponsors, we also added Cirrus Logic, and then we've expanded kind of our work with Hush and Blackwell and SunPro and Pipermatics, recruiting company, and of course there's CD Green Tech, Lighthouse Solar, HEB, and there might be Monkeys, which is a landscaping company. And then there's our what sponsors, which are also helpful. We have Clean Power Marketing Group dealing with just marketing overall, Greenhawk Business Centers that does bookkeeping and accounting, the Deering Group and Greener by Design, working closely with Harris Energy Solutions to do design for solar farms, and then Greenbelt Solar, a longtime solar installer in our area. And then I guess it's a little bit of backtracking. For those of you that are new, Tatiana, if you want to take a slide back. Yeah, for those of you that are new, kind of telling the story, Solar Austin is almost a 20-year-old organization. And I hope that you guys were able to tune in a couple months ago when we had kind of our founders join us on the call and share a little bit about how we came together as a community of enthusiasts that noticed that, hey, we need to expand the access and the education of solar across not just Austin, but Central Texas. So we've definitely done we've expanded in different types of leaps, working closely with Austin Energy, working closely with the city itself, so that we are both a 501c3 and a 501c4. And then we are helping kind of shape the path across Texas and their different chapters of Texas Solar Energy Society so that we can do this and replicate our initiatives to create healthier communities. Amongst those things, we have 5 different main committees or initiatives or points, strongly focusing on policy advocacy. So how can we expand local policy with utilities or with the city to be more solar friendly? Likewise is solar education. So making partnerships with schools, with summer camps, with especially with girls that want to get into engineering and science. So that takes care of the solar education aspect of the org. Myself, I help lead the events and the outreach of organizations, such as this happy hour and other events that we plan for the remainder of the year and next year. And our flagship program has become the Pathways program, which we'll dive into the details soon, but it's essentially how do we provide students that want to get into the solar energy industry with the opportunity to get a little bit of work experience and fill in that need that we have as an industry to hire qualified and passionate individuals. Lastly is our community installations. That is kind of a committee and initiative that is creating these community resiliency centers across Austin, usually giving donated equipment to other nonprofits so that these centers can have solar and storage and can reduce their energy bills. So more details to come on that. All this great work is pretty much done by this group of fine people that you see here, and led by Tatiana Cannon, who joined our board as our executive director a few months ago, and she's definitely helped piece everything together and make sure that we're on track and moving forward. Kaiba is also our president, so they both coincide a little bit with leading our initiatives. And then everybody else supports our different groups. So feel free to drop us a note if you are interested or want to also lend a helping hand to expand these different initiatives, have any ideas. We're always interested in hearing from you as to like whenever you want to dedicate a few more time or you have any expertise that you feel might be an additional value to the group. More than welcome at info@solaraustin.com. That'll come in later. But to speak more about our current happenings, I'll let Tatiana kind of explain Pathways, what it is, how it got done, and what we're up to right now, because there's lots of cool things up on the upcoming for the next few months.
Yeah, thanks, Juan. And thank you for highlighting all the incredible people working with Solar Austin right now. I say with absolutely no hyperbole that I stand on the shoulders of giants doing this work. So it is an honor to help move it forward to the next iteration. And with that, I will not read the slide to you all, as you all are very capable and literate. But as most of you have heard about our Pathways to Clean Energy careers, and as we're meeting with some incredible female leaders in the field, it's important for us to highlight the really the spirit of why this program was created, what we're continuing to do. We have a lot of exciting things going on, and we're excited to continue to expand, but we always like to include this slide to share a bit more about the work that we're doing there. So I did want to share an upcoming deadline. If you know a college student or a young professional who's looking to get involved with an internship in clean energy, the Pathways program, I've got a cat coming to the party, y'all. And there she is. If you know anyone who would be interested in being an intern and don't know where to get their foot in the door for renewable energy, or they might maybe have another like technical skill or training but want to transition, we accept all types. We are so excited to match with our partner companies, and the deadline to apply is coming up this week, October 31st. I believe that's Sunday. And this will be for internships starting in January. So in addition to that, we have some really exciting things coming up in terms of community installation. I will pitch it back to Juan to talk more about this after I kind of give the headlines. If you scan this, it will take you to our volunteer form. I will also drop that into our chat here in a moment, but we are officially getting to hang out in person and do some fun things in November and December with our events and our community installations team. And that will include some solar camps that we are hosting on November 13th and 20th. And we will have another event coming up in December, a couple of events coming up in December that we hope you all will join in support of the organization. And all of those will be in person. So spoiler alert, I am 5 feet tall. I know that's always a big one when people first meet me. Other than that, I hope I get to shake some hands and safely exchange elbow bumps and things like that. I know it has been a long desert of a time since we've been able to gather in person, but we're looking forward to doing it soon. So Juan, I'll let you take over the next couple of announcements and share more about the installation and our December event.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that you have giants so you can stand on their shoulders, and that way that can elevate a little bit of the height difference over there. But trying to do big things here, trying to get recognized and raise awareness for solar and the accessibility of solar. That's why we're really happy about the progress that we've done with our Children's Haven installation. They'll be coming on for November as a nonprofit. So Children's Haven is located right on Chicon Street. And we've been grateful to receive donations for most of this equipment, and we're very much interested to have you guys join us. If you want to volunteer, if you just want to see things, feel for it, feel free to scan that QR code and see if you're available to participate on November 13th and 20th. So that'll be kind of the second installation that we'll do, and we hope to expand it more. But also, kind of as Tatiana mentioned, October 31st is the applications that are due for students that want to participate in our Pathways program. And then we are very excited also because we're combining our November and December happy hours into one. We're going to be doing this in person by touring a solar array. This will be the La Loma Community Center, located on the east side of town, very close to Springdale Road. And then we'll follow up kind of that tour that's going to be led by Austin Energy with an in-person happy hour. So you can mark your calendars for Thursday, December 9th, 4:30 to 5:30. That's when the tour will happen, and then followed with a happy hour at a brewery to be determined, but pretty close. So we're making headway there. Follow us on Eventbrite, LinkedIn, Facebook, and that way you can stay up to date with our updates. And very much looking forward to meeting you guys in person, as I know that it's been a year full of virtual happy hours and virtual talks. So of course, want to move forward with introducing the ladies that will be joining us. These are giant ladies too, not so much by stature, but perhaps more by their recognition in the industry and what they've done to be subject matter experts when it comes to storage. So we'll be joined by Madeline Acri, who is the energy storage manager at Soligent. Soligent is an a solar distributor. Because of her stance, she's been able to work more with the installers and help them understand all the different options that exist in the marketplace for them to solve the problem of like, hey, I need some energy while the sun isn't shining and the grid is down. So very much looking forward to hearing from her. Also going to be joined by Jenniffer Gallegos. She is the director of programs and communications at Yotta Energy. And Yotta is an innovative manufacturer of commercial inversion and storage solutions. And what they've been able to do is put panel level storage underneath panels, which will help businesses kind of make it feasible for them to have backup storage. So Jenniffer is very well trained on the subject, and very excited to hear from her about what things look like from her on the commercial side. And then tying everything together will be Judy McElroy, who serves as CEO of Fractal Energy Storage Consultants. Most of her emphasis comes from the utility scale, but I think her perspective will be extremely valuable as she kind of like has a good tap on what is going on, the macro effects of storage. I think that as we've seen and heard in the news, we've reached new heights to levels of demands of car batteries and batteries for homes. So it's important to know, how does all this tie into the larger picture, and how can we move forward to having a more distributed generation, resilient grid? So very happy for you guys to join us. I think that we can also let you guys know that if you have any sort of questions, please drop them on the chat box. We'll save them towards the end unless they're very relevant to the topic of conversation. So I encourage you guys to start popping them in there as soon as you have them, and that way it could be more of like an informal conversation that we have all together. And that's a little bit of the goal here, is just to tap into all this knowledge that we have locally, share these stories, and also see how other people can learn, not just on the technical side, but also from the personal side, how they got to where they are. I know that there's a couple students on the line or recent grads, and I think that it's always good to hear from other experts. So welcome all. Madeline, Jenniffer, and Judy, can you guys hear me okay? Can you guys can do a quick audio and visual check?
Yeah, all's great.
All clear here.
I can hear you.
Awesome. Yeah, so I guess there were a couple of other slides there. Yeah, let me wrap up before we jump into the conversation. I missed a couple slides, but looks like we have an opportunity for you guys to also let us know how you can join and support. So Tatiana, if you can jump right there. Yeah, we're always like looking forward to hearing from you guys. We want to make sure that the organization reflects the needs of the community. So this feedback, if you are able to scan this QR code, is just for a very quick survey, and afterwards you get the chance to win a Solar Austin shirt. Just letting us know what sort of topics you want to hear about, any proposed speakers, ideas for happy hours, ideas for other events, you know, whether it's installations or fun or knowledge. Definitely looking forward to hearing from you as to how we can increase our presence and our value. So please scan it, and you'll have the chance to win a shirt. So thank you, and don't forget to follow us across social media. Yeah, so I guess we can move on a little bit while I took a sip of a beer. Oh, the survey QR code is not working. Let's see if we can fix that. Yeah, I think maybe Tatiana can drop the link off because I don't have it handy with me. Yep, she has all those links, very quick to draw. But we can just start a little bit by opening up and understanding who these ladies are, right? So just understanding the education and the background and what was the journey for each of you. And that way maybe you can give your own introduction about how you ended up finding storage or finding the solar plus storage world, or how it found you. So I'll start off with kind of the first question for Madeline, and then Jen can respond, and so can Judy. But what was kind of your educational journey? What was that path of skills that you needed to harness before you ended up jumping into the industry, and how did you jump into the industry?
Should I go first?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you, Juan, for the great introduction. I just want to start by saying I'm honored to be here because I've attended Solar Austin events for a number of years, and the topics are always so varied, which is one of the things I really like about it. I've learned about a lot of different elements of sustainability in Austin that may not necessarily seem immediately directed to solar, but everyone is sort of connected through a lot of different interests and connections. So I really have enjoyed all of my Solar Austin experiences. So I'm happy to be here. A little bit about my background is that I grew up in Illinois, and I attended the University of Illinois, and I studied mechanical engineering, which in some ways doesn't immediately impact my day-to-day life now as the energy storage manager, but I really value my technical background and how it kind of prepared me for, you know, the renewable industry world in general. And I think the beautiful thing about solar now is that it really is growing at such a rapid scale that people from all different industries are moving into solar. If it's not directly out of college, it's from being in a past industry and kind of hopping into the solar world. So out of when I graduated, I immediately started working. I moved down to Austin right after graduating, and I was working as an account manager for Civic Solar. And if any of you know Emmett Maranker, he is a great, really strong solar advocate, and he was my first manager. And I really learned all the ropes about, you know, what equipment is necessary to install for a residential system. How does that equipment differ from a residential system to a commercial system? And through that sales process, I was mostly working on typical grid tie solar systems, because honestly, in 2016 and 2017, most of the systems that we were working on as a whole were grid tie without storage. But because I had a kind of a knack or an interest in learning more about the technical elements of solar, I started learning about batteries. And I learned about batteries kind of just on a whim, putting that as my little side project, like picking up data sheets on battery-based inverters and reading about different battery manufacturers at the time. And, you know, even only 6 years ago, we were talking about mostly lead acid, a little bit of lithium, but lead acid was definitely the majority at that time. And kind of over the course of just learning about more projects that have battery-based systems, which back then were mostly kind of cabin in the woods type systems that you might expect, where utility access is very expensive to gain. I would just work with DIYers and size their battery banks and work with them to make sure that the discharge is correct. So after that, Civic Solar got acquired by CEV Green Tech, and I joined the Soligent team, and now really spend my time educating installers and educating homeowners to make sure that they understand what battery-based systems are correct for their home, what works and what doesn't work within the area that they live, and making sure that expectations are set, because there is a little bit of education surrounding a battery that is more necessary than if you just slap some solar panels on your roof and remain grid connected. So I try to kind of debunk what those myths might be.
Cool. Yeah, and I think it's important to mention that I probably wouldn't be in the city if it wasn't for you. You were one of the first person I spoke to, and then you helped me kind of understand the company, because we used to work together back in our time at Civic Solar. So definitely, it's funny how the world just kind of comes back together, and we're able to have this opportunity. But Jen, the same question goes to you. Speaking a little bit more about what your journey was, both educational wise and then also what professionally wise, how you ended up in Yotta.
Yes, thank you, Juan, and thank you, Solar Austin, for having us here. I feel honored to be on this amazing panel with these other women leaders in the industry. So thank you so much. So my path has been a little bit circuitous, but I want to start by saying I've always been interested in renewable energy ever since I can remember. And I decided that I wanted to get an environmental engineering degree for my undergrad. And at the time, Stanford had one of the best programs in the country. So I went to Stanford, I got my environmental engineering degree, and decided to come back to Texas. I'm originally from Texas. I came back and learned that renewable energy, renewable resource engineering really wasn't a thing in Texas. So I had to pivot into a different branch of engineering, fire protection to be exact. I went back to school, got my master's in fire protection engineering, got my license to practice engineering here in the state of Texas, and did that, but I still had this desire to get into renewables. And it was a bit more crystallized because I knew I wanted it to be in renewables at the intersection of emerging technology. And I then was able to pivot to Yotta Energy, which is my current company where I work. And Yotta focuses on energy storage systems. And I feel like, again, that circuitous path has gotten me to where I'm at today. And right now, at least for the past 2 years that I've been there, I've done a variety of things because we are an emerging technology company, ranging from marketing, sales, PR, communications, and grant writing, among other things.
Cool. So that's an interesting background, and it's kind of like good that you followed your passion there and then say, hey, I want to pursue environmental engineering. And then it's like, well, maybe the world isn't ready for me yet, but I'm ready for the world as it comes. So speaking a little bit about that, how much do you feel like you use your engineering skills? Do you feel like it's something that taught you just like very strong levels of math that you're still applying, or what do you think was the biggest overlap to what it is that you do now?
I would say the biggest overlap, yes, definitely that critical thinking, the problem solving is absolutely essential for my day-to-day. I feel like the creativity that comes with that problem solving is necessary, especially at an emerging technology, a smaller company where every day is different and the problems are not you cannot find the answers in a book. And so I feel like that engineering background has certainly helped me there. It's also helped me as we get UL certifications. That's something that I have a background in also. So for fire protection, you need to have UL certification knowledge. fire safety and life safety experience. And I've designed systems in the past that are now helping us as we, roll out our first generation product.
Okay. That's pretty cool. I think later when we start talking more about the technology, we can jump into the risks of fires. I think that's definitely like a hazard that comes up with batteries and keeping batteries in a house and the risks for homeowners. So amazing origins for you. Now, Judy, I'm curious about yourself as well, kind of like what it was for you to jump into the industry, to become kind of tapped into the utility side of things, and how storage found you, or you found storage. Also, like your educational journey. What was that like for you?
Yeah, I started out as a chemist by trade, and I did that for about 10 years. So I was essentially locked in a lab, basically as a slave to much more senior chemists, and worked around the clock. Pretty lonely type of career path, I believe. And, definitely wasn't happy about it. I think that my kind of getting into energy and storage was not really a linear process, but I think that it's been good for me to explain that to especially younger people, because I think that we get this assumption that you need to do things in a certain order, and there's this kind of grooming process to get to where you are today. But I don't think it really has anything to do with that. I've worked really hard over the years. I've been a professional failure. When I was in my 20s, my teens and my 20s, I was a ultra big athlete. Definitely monetized that very well. And after I got tired of working for somebody else, I wanted to take my ideas, and I wanted to take some chances, and started to use that money to buy businesses and start businesses. So over a 10-year period, I owned and operated and built out many businesses, different types of health clubs, retail stores, nightclubs, published magazines, just everything. I mean, anything I could do that was different that I didn't know how to do. I just couldn't wait to get my hands on it and figure out how to make it work. And it was just, no matter what the idea was or the business, the thing that I craved the most was like, how do I monetize this? And how do I take this from a small business to a big business? And that's really the acumen that I think that I've really built over the years, is really understanding how to address a market and find a problem to solve, and building out a business to fix that problem. So it's just the building of businesses is something that I feel like I've done well at over the years. Did the chemistry thing for a long time, but then after I became more of an entrepreneur, not only owned and operated the businesses, but then that led and evolved into having my own consulting firm, where I went out and I helped other businesses go to market, from all the look and feel, the polishing, building out the internal processes, helping them build their teams, and setting up sales channels. And that slowly evolved into the energy space. So in the beginning, it was a variety of different customers, and toward the end, it was working for more energy-based companies. And at that point, I was approached to take more of a C-level position for some energy storage startups. And at the time, I didn't really appreciate energy storage. I mean, it seemed pretty cool, but it seemed a bit far-fetched for me. This was back at the time when it was all lead acid batteries. There was no lithium on the scene, but I had some really good relationships that I had built over the years with utilities and energy professionals, and it seemed like the timing was right. And from what I'd heard, it just seemed that, hey, this storage thing is going to be really big. And I sensed that there was going to be a really big gap, or a really big chasm between buyers and sellers. And in the beginning, I really wanted to be in the software space, but unfortunately, it was just too soon. To sell software, especially to sell software in the energy space, you need reputation and you need relationships. It's not a sort of like you build it and they will come type of approach. And I didn't have that at the time. So I decided to put together a consulting firm and hired the best of the best, hired the people that we're out building the earliest battery storage projects in PJM and Hawaii and Alaska, and first projects in Texas, and doing all the big lead acid systems, putting in the controls, retrofitting with lithium when the prices started coming down. And I was a sponge. I couldn't help but just spend every minute I had just picking their brain and getting smarter and smarter. So every single thing that I know about storage has come from natural curiosity and just aggressively and proactively asking questions from my peers and doing the outreach. And it's not by accident, is what I'm saying. It took a lot of work, but now here I am and have several businesses in the storage space, and the future is very bright. Storage is not going away. The projections are significant, and it's an exciting space because it's still early enough where there's so many opportunities to create businesses and monetize businesses, because there's so many needs to fill and so many problems to solve. And so one of my favorite things that we do as a consulting firm is we help new companies come into the market, whether they're US companies that are making that transition from renewables into storage, or overseas companies that maybe were really big in the automotive sector or oil and gas, and people that own coal plants and gas plants. And we're helping these people transition into clean energy and storage. And you can tell it makes me I'm very passionate about it, because it's helping companies make very, very big, aggressive decisions. And that's kind of the way that I like to think. So it's something that really resonates with me. And so in addition to Fractal Energy Storage Consultants, which is a consulting firm, over the years, we did spin out other businesses. So we have a business called Fractal Model, and that's a modeling software for storage that is a licensed product that we license to energy companies. And then in 2018, we spun a business called Fractal EMS out, EMS standing for Energy Management System. And that is a hardware software control system. So a lot of the big batteries that are out on the grid, and many more to come, our team actually goes out, does the communications, the network architecture, the SCADA, and puts in the controls for the batteries. And here in our Austin office, we actually have an operations center. So we get to see what all the batteries and all the solar is doing. And it's very, very exciting. But I'll stop there.
No, it's fun, and I definitely don't want to cut you off, because I mean, you tapped on like so many different things. I also started in the lab, and it's crazy how that persistence of testing something out, and you just have to follow and tweak that recipe and have that that grit that it takes to build a company and continue doing it multiple times is very similar to lab work in a way, where you just have to tweak things so that you make sure that things are ready to go into to solving the question you want to answer.
Well, I don't do chemistry anymore. So the best,
Yeah.
I mean, if you want a good martini, I can mix that up. Is that chemistry? I'm not sure. But no, it's not something I really use anymore. It was never meant to be my final destination. Kids coming out of college, they assume that what they studied is going to be their career path. And it rarely is. You got to get out there and you got to taste life, and you got to try things, and you got to be willing to fall flat on your face and pick yourself up and try new things. So I've had just an incredible experience by failing and trying to do something different.
Mm-hmm. So how was it that the world of solar and storage jumped into your lab, or that you found it?
Yeah, I started working as basically a C-level for hire, taking C-level positions for energy storage startups. And it was a lot of smoke and mirrors, and it still is. There's a lot of new companies in the space that claim to have software solutions or control solutions or innovative technologies. And when you go in and you start working with them, you're like, guys, where is it? And well, we haven't built it yet, but they're out on the street selling it. And I got so frustrated by that. And then just the constant tinkering and the constant engineering. And it just, you have to be able to monetize whatever you're doing at the end of the day. Otherwise, it's just a hobby. And so that frustration just led me to take it a step further and decide to find my own way in the storage industry.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, so I guess Audrey had a question for you on this, and that's kind of like the question I wanted to ask everyone. But for you specifically, Judy, what are the leadership challenges in your business? Kind of speaking more about Fractal Consulting Group.
You know, the day is probably equally split by making very difficult decisions where I have to make decisions where people look at me sideways and they're like, are you sure you understand the risks about what you're about to do? So I am questioned all day long about risks and leaps I'm willing to take and how I'm willing to spend money. And it's a lot of pressure, certainly. And I spend a lot of time apologizing and for things that maybe didn't go up to standard or up to par. And that's a big part of what I do. I'd say the most thing that I'm concerned about is the business development, the strategic partnerships, really creating that enterprise value. I don't want to provide a service if we can't provide value. I don't want to go just do something because it's popular and other people are doing it and they're making money. We get projects that come in and engagements that come in and people are like, can you do this? And I'm like, yeah, we could, but you could go to a whole number of engineering firms and they can do the same thing. I just don't feel like we're innovating or creating value. I don't want to do it. I want to be the best at whatever 10 to 20% is that we're focused on and be able to really differentiate ourselves. So I want to pursue that value every single day. And, you know, I'm surrounded by whiteboards and Post-it notes to remind me of what my duty is. And then just the customer success. It is such a big deal. I'm not chasing money. I'm like chasing customer success. If I can make customer success, they will keep coming back and giving us business after business after business. So it's just a different philosophy that I have, but so far it's been working and it'll continue to evolve, I hope, over the years and maybe continue to change. But so far, that's what I've been really focused on in my role.
Thanks. I think that's very valuable to keep the customer center of mind while there's so much money that's coming into the sector too. I had a question that will be both for Jen and for Madeline, just wrapping up this segment about your journey. As to Madeline, what advice do you hope to give women that want to jump into the industry, the storage industry particularly? What would you say to, I don't know, a 10-year-old or a Madeline that was 10 years ago?
Sure, that's a great question. And I would definitely agree with Judy that what you study and what you think you want to do at the time is not necessarily going to dictate the future that you're going to have. So I would say just always ask questions. I think people who are curious and constantly pursuing curiosities, whether that's a professional type of curiosity or a personal type of curiosity, because I never thought that I would be doing energy storage deployments. I didn't even necessarily know what that was 10 years ago, but I always had an interest in things that were eco-friendly to some extent and good for the planet. And if you think about things that are fulfilling on a personal level and can also translate on a professional level, which I think energy storage is a really great way, that is decarbonizing. So that's something that makes you feel good and that is good for the planet. It's to pursue things that can kind of captivate you and have professional implications. And thankfully, no one ever really came to me when I was in school and said, no, that's not something you can do. Because I think as long as there's a curiosity and an interest level and a commitment to learning more, any career path is possible.
Jen, what about yourself? What are some words of advice for young people out there, especially women that want to get into storage?
Sure. I'd like to borrow from one of my favorite authors, Kevin Kelly, and he says, "You are not late." And so that's my top piece of advice for tonight is you are not late. There is lots of innovation yet to be had in energy storage. It is still an industry that's in its infancy. So there are no true experts in the sense that it's a young industry. We don't know the answers, and there are way more questions, and we're all trying to figure this out together. The other piece of advice is that as you're looking to work with an energy storage company, as you narrow down, say, your top few companies, really shift your narrative from applying for a position to what are the pain points of this company? What are their needs? You can find this out by talking to existing employees, by talking to executives who work at that company, by talking to the CEO, if that's a possibility. So really digging in to what their pain points are and how your skill set can help. You'll quickly determine, hey, is this a fit for me or not? But then you'll also learn, okay, here's how I can help you, company X, and here's the path that we can take to get you there.
I like that. I think that we're all kind of in the business of finding solutions and helping our companies or customers, kind of like help solve their problems, right? And that's kind of at the end. I'm in the sales sector, and that's essentially what it is, right? It's solution seeking. Go ahead.
Well, I don't want to cut you off, but there was a question in the chat that I wanted to answer after you finish your statement.
Sure. I think maybe we can, about market opportunities in energy storage.
Yes.
I think we can speak about that maybe after we talk about storage technologies, right? And because we'll tap into residential and commercial, and then that way it can have a deeper light. But I guess now is just to talk more about the technologies itself of storage. Of just speaking, I think both Madeline and Judy, you mentioned that you guys were started in the storage space back when lead acid was the common type, right? And I think we've come a long way in the past less than 5 years, or in the past 2 years, and the spike of lithium as the energy storage of choice. Different types of combinations of lithium, and I think that it's important takeaways as to like what it all matters, right? When we look at storage, it's important to consider the capacity of the storage cell, the depth of discharge, and then kind of like how each of the different characteristics, both with pros and cons. But lithium isn't the only solution out there that comes for storage. It's just probably the most common and most, I guess, replicable and feasible solution. So maybe it's just understanding from your perspective, Madeline, about like what are the different options that exists for a homeowner or installer to choose. I think you mentioned that lead acid was a choice in the beginning, but what are you seeing now? And I know that there's a difference between AC coupling and DC coupling to your solar array, but maybe helping the general public understand what options are out there for a storage system.
Sure, and there definitely are. So without kind of spending too much time diving into the technical elements, which I think for any homeowner that's looking to add solar and storage to their home, understanding some decent level of technical understanding of what you're putting into your house or putting into your garage is important. This is a battery that's going to be powering your whole entire house potentially. So it's good to kind of not necessarily just accept what someone is trying to sell you, but to challenge them and make sure that you understand how it's going to be performing in your home. But for someone who's installing solar on their home for the first time, the difference between AC coupling and DC coupling is this. When you put the solar panels on your roof, they produce direct current. So the DC is going to be feeding your house. The DC has to go into your house somehow, but your house is running on alternating current, which is AC. So on a traditional grid tie system, you have the panels on the roof, and then you either have a string inverter or microinverters that are going to convert the DC to AC. When you do this, you have your grid tie inverter. To add batteries to an existing system like that, you need a battery-based inverter. The grid tie inverter doesn't know how to interact with the battery. So when the grid goes out, if the sun is shining and the grid goes down, for example, in February during our snowpocalypse, all of those grid tie inverters are going to shut down. That's how they're designed to function. So if you were to add a secondary battery-based inverter, then your system now has two inverters, the grid tie inverter for your solar and the hybrid inverter for your batteries. once you add that secondary hybrid inverter, that can act as a grid forming device to keep your panels on your roof functional and continuing to create power for you while it's sunny and charge your batteries. So AC coupling is when you have two inverters, the grid tie inverter and the battery-based inverter. In the city of Austin, with Austin Energy, AC coupling is the only way you can add batteries to your system. And that may be revised next year, but TBD on the status of DC coupling, which is the other way to add batteries to a system. So SolarEdge and Generac are the two most prominent DC coupled solutions right now. So the way these systems work is that your PV inverter has the functionality that the battery inverter also has. So you have a single inverter that can work for both the PV and the battery. So it's doing both of those roles at once. This can be a little bit more affordable because you only need one inverter to convert your PV to power your house at one time. It's also a little bit more efficient because you're only making that power conversion one time rather than two times by having the grid tie and hybrid inverter. So with DC coupling, you have a single inverter, and with AC coupling, you have two. Those are really the only distinctions. In terms of the types of battery you can have on your home, lead acid is still something that people are installing today. It's not as popular, but it still exists in the market. It's not obsolete yet. So what we're seeing most commonly now is partial home backup. So I wouldn't necessarily buy a battery bank that's going to power my entire house. Particularly in Austin, likely you're not going to have a central air conditioner powered by your battery because central air conditioners require the majority of the power that your entire house would use. So you would separate some essential loads from your main service panel. So you would select your lights, your fridge, a few fans, wall outlets, etc. So you would identify those loads to move over to a sub panel, and then you would have a battery powering that sub panel. The battery could either be a lithium battery or lead acid battery. And there are a few different types of lithium options right now. Most commonly, I would say it's sort of a toss-up between lithium iron phosphate and nickel manganese cobalt. Those are the two different most common residential lithium chemistry types for your home. And there are a lot of different reasons why you might choose one or the other. You might install one inside your home or outside of your home, etc. So those are the kind of details that you would talk over with your installer, talk over, with yourself as the homeowner to determine what solution is going to be the best for you. And in terms of the residential solution, it's really just lead acid and then the LFP or NMC lithium options right now in terms of commercially viable, readily available options.
Right.
Remembered it?
Yeah, definitely. And so it's kind of like for those three, it's just like important to consider, the different pros and cons of it, how long it's going to last, the price and everything. I think that kind of taking where you left off and jumping back into Jen's expertise in fire protection, I think that sometimes there's concerns about having storage and having it be a flammable risk, right? So both with that and also keeping in mind that an inverter is a power electronic that we're putting up that's surging a lot of voltage, right? So how do you help satisfy kind of like the worry that exists for a battery catching on fire, as we hear in the media sometimes about, hey, these phones caught on fire, or we hear about like these installations and transformers blowing up and that sort of thing, from your point of view?
Sure. No, that's a great question. And actually, I almost would let Jen talk a little bit more about UL 9540. So Underwriter Labs is a third-party testing organization that comes up with these different certifications. And UL 9540 is what Soligent Solutions are using right now to ensure that they are safe for your home. And so batteries that have that certification, you can trust are going to be able to be controlled if the temperature is not in line with what the inverter is telling it should be, etc. So using third-party certifications is a way to ensure that particularly UL listings your batteries are safe enough. And I definitely want Jen to dive into that as well.
Thanks, Juan and Madeline. So in terms of safety for energy storage systems, I wanted to just take a quick step back and highlight, we do have what we could qualify as two different types. There are centralized or battery energy storage systems. These are the common container systems that are typically installed with utility scale or very large solar and wind projects. Now we're seeing a shift towards smaller distributed energy resources. So energy that's packed in a smaller format. For example, Yotta is an example. The Tesla Powerwall is another example. So you've got a lower kilowatt per hour per product that's being installed directly at the house or business, just as an example. There are several different safety codes, regulations, and standards that are involved here. But the biggest two are, as Madeline mentioned, UL 9540, which is a standard for battery energy storage systems. We also have an NFPA standard that deals with these variety of types of energy storage systems, including your centralized and your distributed. And we also have this other mechanism for testing that's called UL 9540A. And what that is basically you're taking your, whether it's a centralized system or a distributed energy resource, you're taking that energy storage system and setting it on fire and seeing what are the results of that. And you work with the authority having jurisdiction, whether that's the city, whether that's a state, whether that's a federal agency, or some combination of those three. And you work towards a plan that says, here's what happened during the test. Here's what shows how our system is safe. Here are the safety mechanisms that we're going to use to meet your specific codes, rules, regulations.
Gotcha. So that definitely helps. As we sometimes there's a risk of keeping batteries in the garage or keeping them outdoors, based on the ratings of the NEMA encoding and such. And it's important to highlight how, as a transition, we as an industry, we've changed from, as you say, the centralized to a more distributed pattern of energy storage. I think that there's also a little bit of an interest kind of on the world of microgrids too. And I know that perhaps like Judy, with your time working with people that have come into the US market from other places perhaps, or your exposure to other markets, especially the ones in islands and in Hawaii, could you help us understand like what a microgrid really is?
Yeah, great question. I think that maybe the general population's understanding of what a microgrid is it varies. You could say that I'm adding a battery to a solar farm, and that's a microgrid. You could have a generator in a solar farm, and that could be a microgrid. When I typically am faced with a microgrid project, it's where we want the battery to be able to island when there is a loss of line power. And when the line power is restored, you would be able to resynchronize with the grid. And that requires a very specific combination of equipment and engineering and protections. And what we find is that a lot of utilities, especially, are really interested in doing resiliency with the battery. And of course, like, well, what is resiliency? And usually what they're after is that they want to do lots of different things with a battery. And they expect that battery to become a microgrid when there's a loss of line power. But it's always a bit disheartening when I have to tell them that, a battery is not really a UPS. I'd say over 99% of the battery storage that is installed today on the grid, large scale, it's not designed and cannot island. So if there's a loss of line power, the battery goes offline too. And that was something that we saw during the snowstorm back in February, is we had a lot of batteries that once they discharged, they weren't allowed to charge back up because all of these utilities were in what's called a load shedding event, and the batteries weren't allowed to charge back up. So I think sometimes looking back, people think the batteries made a killing and they sold a lot of energy, and there was a few that did, but the ones that were distribution connected, so connected to the distribution voltage, most of those were not allowed to operate because of the load shedding events that were happening. The biggest deterrent that I've seen is that it really is the price. We had a recent bid that we did for a microgrid project just a few months ago. And to give you an idea of what that extra cost looks like, and I'll explain what the extra costs and where they come from. But if I took just a 1 megawatt 4-hour battery, and so assume a COD of this year, it would cost about 1.7 million dollars for that 1 megawatt 4-hour battery. So keep in mind, smaller batteries cost a lot more on a per unit basis than larger batteries. That might be something we talk about at another time. But the second we would go out to bidders and say, hey, we want this battery to be able to island, guess what happened to the price? It went up to over $3 million. So, that was roughly about a 40, maybe even 50% increase in price, depending on the vendor. And the reason why is because there's so much more complexity and costs of being able to successfully create and form an island with a battery. There's not a lot of suppliers in the space. I've seen articles online. I saw one like last year. It was some utility in the Northeast, and they were celebrating this grant project that they put in. They were talking about the resiliency it was going to create. And I could tell just by looking at the photo that, hey, that inverter is not capable of operating in grid farming mode. There's no way you can do a microgrid with that. So there's a lot of smoke and mirrors in this whole microgrid space too, but there is specific requirements for an inverter to be able to pull off that grid farming mode, and also to be able to do what's called seamless transfer. So when you're transitioning from grid tied to islanded and back, that means that there's not going to be any loss of power. And so you look at what inverters can do the grid forming, and then you look at which inverters of that pool can actually do the seamless transfer. And now all of a sudden you have less players in that space. Less competition and less players equates to higher cost per unit on just the inverters alone. And then what I mentioned earlier about just all the added complexity and costs. You need to do a whole lot of extra studies, real and reactive power. You got to understand what your step-up load looks like, and that affects the sizing of the battery. You need to oversize the battery and the components to be able to prop up the fault current. And then, of course, you need to put in a battery to back up your battery. So what that means is you have to put in a UPS, typically like a lead acid battery bank that's going to power the switchgear and power all the loads, not just the house load, but all the loads necessary to do that black start operation. And then, of course, the added protections and the coordination, it essentially requires a redesign of all the existing substation electrical equipment. So it is not easy, and it is certainly not cheap to put in a battery that is a microgrid or a battery that islands. And sometimes when we go through that exercise, if not most of the time, when the utility sees the cost, there's a bit of a sticker shock. And they're like, well, maybe we don't need that after all. Let's just shift energy or do ancillary services or shift the solar. And it sort of becomes forgotten about. So, there's a lot of talk about microgrids and reliability and resiliency on the federal level. But unless there's going to be subsidies or some type of grant money available, it's going to be awfully hard to kind of close that gap and see a lot of these go in the future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's something that comes to mind too, is kind of forecasting for how much time that battery will be needed, right? Is whether it's going to be 4 hours or whether it's going to be 4 days.
Yeah, and the cost I was throwing around before, that was assuming 10 cycles a year. So the battery would not be used very much. And that's sort of another hangup, right? If you are going to have a battery and its duty is to provide backup power, whether that's to help just during any type of outage, or maybe it's being used as a distribution resource or a transmission resource, right? Like a non-wires alternative solution. That battery is not going to be used for anything else. So you're not going to be arbitraging energy in the market. You're not going to be doing frequency regulation or spinning reserves. You're not doing all of that kind of money-making operation with the battery, because that battery has to sit fully charged and wait for there to be a loss of line power. Otherwise, you're not using it for its intended purpose. And why would you put in all the extra costs and engineering if you're not actually going to use it as a microgrid? So you kind of have to take a pick on what you're going to use that battery for. Now, when you get into C&I applications and residential, completely different. You know, there's more kind of bolt-on, add-on types of solutions, very, very pre-engineered, much simpler. And I'm sure the other ladies can tell you a lot more on that than I can.
Yeah, and I definitely want to jump the conversation back into that, because I think that the audience is interested to know a little bit about the cost and the barriers of utility scale storage, you know, especially policy, but we can jump into that in the last few minutes of the presentation. But Madeline, just you know, this question kind of came up from Tiffany about what trends do you see in retrofits versus new installs for residential storage? What have you seen throughout your tenure, and what can you see that's happening now? And challenges for retrofits compared to new installs?
Sure, that's a really good question. So I would say historically, we're still seeing a lot of retrofits as the primary method. I think a lot of reasons for that is sometimes getting over the initial hurdle of the batteries and the solar all at one time can be too much to swallow. So by installing a system that's battery ready, you can add the battery when you're ready, whether that's 6 months down the line or a year, etc. So if we're talking about AC coupling, one of the most important things is that your battery-based inverter is equal to or larger than your PV inverter, or at least is capable of taking all of the power from your PV inverter so that it can either be channeled to charge your battery or to power your home. Because there are a lot of, with new AC coupled models, they may only fit certain sized grid tie inverters. So let's just say you have a 10 kilowatt array. And in many cases, from a grid tie perspective, a 10 kilowatt array might be a normal sized grid tie system. But to add a hybrid inverter to that, most of the hybrid inverter limits are at 9.6 kilowatts. So you really can't add a 9.6 kilowatt maximum solution. And just a few examples of that would be Schneider, Outback, Solark, all would need 2 inverters. So what you can do is, if you have 10 kilowatt array, you would need 2 hybrid inverters to stack in parallel in order to provide enough kind of coverage, if you will, to take in all of those 10 kilowatts of your grid tie array and then channel that into your home or into the battery. So at this time, there are a ton of different retrofit products, and those could be coming also from Panasonic, Q-Cells, Sonnen. So if you have a 10 kilowatt array, you can certainly find a solution of two inverters or more, and there are probably, I mean, even off the top of my head, maybe 10 different inverter brands that could work as a potential option. And I would still say, even for retrofits, most new projects that are retrofits are going to be going the lithium method rather than lead acid, because even someone who may have had lead acid in the past, because lead acid has a shorter cycle life, and particularly if you discharge it to a high depth, those banks are being replaced now with lithium solutions, because the lithium solutions can be discharged deeper and have a longer warranty.
Gotcha. So I think that helps, Tiffany. I know that you know, it's kind of like breaking also the different options are available in the market, and for what will be also in the future, right? As you know, the need for storage will come up, the cost will come down, that's a trend that you definitely see is the retrofit game, and that's an important consideration to have. Jen, I think that's also the question I wanted to ask you, was a little bit about the trends that you see in the next 5 years, and also speaking about like what sort of recommendations you would give for business owners that want to be a little bit more cost savings when it comes to like adding storage to their solar installation.
Yes, so in terms of trends, again, I'm going to step back here to give some context on size of industry. So currently, we're 2021 or near the end of 2021, it's about a $2 billion industry. That's energy storage. By 2035, so say the next 14 years, the energy storage industry is expected to grow to about 500 billion or $500 billion. And that doesn't include EVs, which are basically batteries on wheels. So we've got a lot of, again, innovation that's going to happen, new business models are going to emerge, new products, companies, et cetera. Because we're going to see tons of innovation in the industry, one of the trends is also tied to that is going to be massive decrease in cost for this technology. With that massive decrease in cost, we're going to start seeing distributed energy resources or DERs on practically or practically every building. So in the next 5 years, we're definitely going to be on the path to that. And we're also, going to build on what we already know energy storage can do, which is, benefits today, speaking to that part of your question, Juan, benefits today for the building owner are that you can use energy, stored energy once the sun goes down. You can use energy storage once you can determine the pricing for your energy and basically use that stored energy when it costs more based on utility tariffs. And the other benefit is something, again, that's still being innovated on, which is providing battery backup. In other words, how can I keep my business operational even if the grid goes down? And that's going to provide, again, enormous savings for business owners.
Great. So I think that I could also take this time to ask you a little bit about Joshua's question earlier. That was like, where do you see like the fastest growth of energy storage? And maybe this could be both for the numbers that you were speaking about. Do you see that that's like as a sector as a whole, or just commercial, or where do you see that uptick?
So when I say energy storage, I mean all facets and types of energy storage. So that includes things like geothermal, hydropowered, a flywheel or mechanical, and other forms of energy storage that are still being innovated on, that are still in the research and development phase. So again, not just battery technologies. Batteries will be part of it, but we also need, there's this great graph, I believe Department of Energy has put it out, that shows, we need energy storage for, these short bursts of needs that we have as a society. We need more of the, say, medium duration. So say several days to, a week or two, but then we also need what's called long duration energy storage. So thinking of it in terms of going from maybe that 1 week to several weeks and into the months. So when I say energy storage, I mean, again, getting down to the, seconds or microseconds, all the way up to months. And again, it's not just batteries. Batteries will be a huge part of that and are extremely important, but there are also going to be other technologies that we continue to innovate on.
Cool. Amazing. I think Judy also kind of speaking about this, I'd love to get your take on what sort of trends you've seen across your time and that you've started to see kind of projects being used. I know that hydrogen is a talk of utility scale storage, but I was like, what are some opportunities that you see that are kind of like up and new or trends that you think that we should keep an eye on for the next like 5 years or so?
I'm a bit kind of maybe bearish on there being really significant change over the next 4 or 5 years. We still haven't really finished all the things that we were supposed to have finished by now in terms of market changes, rule changes, policy. A big part of that is how distributed energy resources can participate in wholesale markets, how they're registered, and a lot of that was mandated by FERC, the FERC Energy Regulatory Commission. And I know that Texas or the ERCOT market is not subject to FERC jurisdiction, but they still do follow suit. And we're really behind on getting a lot of the market changes done and implemented, not just here in Texas, but in all the markets as a whole. And the reason being is that as you try to accommodate and integrate more distributed energy resources into the grid, it requires a lot of cost at the grid level, and it requires like essentially a complete overhaul of the market models. Most of the ISOs or RTOs, which are the grid balancing authorities, they have basically said that, hey, we need to do a complete overhaul, and we're going to need to do a major overhaul of our energy management system and how we take care of the grid. And this is going to take 4 or 5 years. So most of the compliance filings we've seen relative to some of the recent FERC filings or FERC rulings, these have planning horizons of several to not maybe up to 5 or 6 years. So it may take us all the way to 2025 or 2026 to see distributed energy resources fully integrated into the grid, where they're receiving proper participation, they're receiving proper compensation, proper valuation. We're not there yet. Things are changing very quickly on the technology scene. Storage is more modular. It has been 100% shift to LFP at this point on the utility scale. Storage comes very prepackaged, huge convergence on liquid cooling. Most of the major storage providers have gravitated or shifted towards a larger prismatic 280 amp cell. And the reason being is because where the batteries come from, specifically the battery cells, we're getting to a point where it's becoming so commoditized that people don't really mind or don't care as much of where the battery cells from. As long as there's a bankable company willing to put a wrap on the project, it's further complicated by a lot of the supply issues that we're seeing. So pricing will come down a little bit. It's actually going back up right now because of some of the supply constraints in the industry. It's not going to come down as fast as we had previously thought. We're definitely going to see storage used in more applications. So outside of Texas, and now just starting in Texas, we're starting to see storage used as a transmission asset. So instead of building transmission wires or doing substation expansions, storage is now being at least considered. Now, it doesn't always make sense, but at least it's being considered, and there's opportunities for that. We're also seeing a lot of new grid services in the works. So every ISO or RTO has their sort of assortment of different ways of balancing the grid, from frequency and spinning reserves. And we're seeing new, faster, more flexible balancing types of products, new shorter duration, faster, flexible spinning reserve products. And these are important because these new products, they essentially roll out the welcome mat for storage developers to come in and build. They create pricing signals for storage investment and storage development. So in virtually every market, we're seeing new ancillary service products being proposed and massive changes to how energy and ancillary markets are being conducted. So it's been pretty exciting. And of course, finally, the policy is unbelievable. We have 9 states right now that have storage targets or mandates. I'm expecting over the next 5 years, we're probably going to see another 4 or 5 states at least come out with storage targets. And that's very, very exciting for big and small solar, big and small storage, because those mandates, they trickle down from the state level. And then typically they're allocated to individual utilities that have to go out for procurement and buy solar and buy storage. And they're usually coupled with incentive programs or subsidies, feed-in tariffs, and it makes it for a really appealing opportunities from the development standpoint.
Yeah, and I know that's one of the key things, right? Is making sure the policy is in place for the adoption of technology to happen, right? Something that solar is still trying to do. I know that we have about like 4 minutes left, and we have an engaged audience here. I wanted to give the speakers a chance for any sort of closing remarks, any sort of advice or considerations you want to give. There were some questions a little bit about any sort of barriers to creating virtual power plants or demand response, but I'll let you guys or let you gals speak about any sort of closing remarks or words of advice that you'd like to give off before I open up the mic. And if you three are able to stick along and help answer the questions, that'd be great. But I'll try to also wrap up the show so people can resume with their evening. But Madeline, maybe you can go first, and then followed by Jen and Judy. Any last few comments?
I would say in terms of emerging technology, when we are working with residences, we're trying to really emphasize kind of, to some degree, tried and true installations. So I personally am not seeing a ton of like crazy innovative things that are trying to get into people's backyards. But I'm sure that the larger scale space that is a little bit more innovative or trying to do something that's kind of cutting edge is getting there. But as of right now, I would say we're kind of still operating in the lead acid and then the lithium space.
Jen, what about you? What do you see?
I'm gonna, John had a question, and then there was a follow-up by Kaden, and I apologize if I'm butchering your name. But there was a question on new technologies that we're seeing or that we anticipate or predict on. Of course, I'm partial to lithium ion technology because that's what our company is built upon. However, I do see that solid state technology is rapidly advancing. We have a ton of dollars being poured into this. And for me, it's a matter of time before, again, solid state technology and potentially solid state combined with another type of energy storage will help us crack the say mid to long range problem that we're seeing.
Cool. To watch out for. Judy, anything else that you see that maybe we didn't mention before? I think that perhaps like hydrogen was the follow-up question, or combined electrolyzers.
I don't see that, on the street. There is a big difference between what you'll read online and read in articles. There's a huge difference between what's happening in the investment community versus what's happening on the development level. I would agree with the other ladies in that it is all lithium all day long for projects that are going in. Now there is some interest in alternative technologies. I would say the one that's probably has pulled ahead of the alternatives has been the zinc air players. So there's a battery company called EOS. They have some work to do for sure. They still haven't really shown a fully commercialized product yet. But they are, I'd say, a good contender as a non-lithium alternative. The one that I'm excited about is the sodium ion battery. It's made by CATL, huge, currently a huge, probably if not the largest lithium iron phosphate battery supplier out of China, both in the EV space and the stationary storage space. They've had thousands of people working on this battery for a decade, and they're looking at actually doing commercial deployments as early as starting in the next 2 years. I think that's going to be the next big thing. As far as the different flow batteries, the heat batteries, the rust batteries, they're all in different stages of commercialization, but I would not say that any of those are considered commercialized yet by the financial industry. And that's a big part of this is, when it comes time to put a project in, it's not just about providing the equipment. It's about being able to, leverage a bank sheet or be a bankable company to where somebody is willing to wrap you, or you have to be able to put out not just, you have to be able to be willing and able to do performance guarantees. I mean, all of these utility scale projects have very strict and stringent guarantees with power, energy, round trip efficiency, availability. And unfortunately, a lot of these alternative technologies would not be able to meet some of those expectations that are becoming a commonplace in the, I would say, the industry at this point. So they all have some work to do, but it is exciting to watch a lot of the investment activity. And some of the stuff that you hear the most of, the most promising stuff, the ones that are getting billion-dollar valuations, a lot of it, remember, is there's smoke and mirrors happening. There are companies that are still, their storage medium is still in a test tube, very, very early stage. So it is going to be a while for some of those companies to really be able to, get traction. And unfortunately, the part that they have the most difficulty with is getting those economies of scale. We're never going to have a phone or a car that has a flow battery in it or a zinc air battery. And that really hurts because lithium has really been able to get its economies of scale by essentially riding on the coattails of the electric vehicle market. So it makes it really tough to compete on a cost standpoint and have the same types of opportunities as lithium. But I am very excited about the sodium ion battery. The rest is a lot of romantic ideas. I hope that some of them come out the other end. Many of them won't, but it makes for some really exciting conversations on the investment scene.
Yeah. And kind of following up on Madeline's message earlier, it's like stick to the tried and true, right? Like what's been tested, and especially that's a great consideration if any of you are thinking about adding storage to your solar system at homes and such. So definitely want to appreciate the great conversation we had, all these great perspectives and how they intertwine into the storage space that is causing so much excitement and so much need for us to fill in the gap for providing that added resiliency. And prevent more and keep us more in check and prepared for what the climate has for us. So I want to really appreciate everyone for participating as a speaker, as an engaged audience, for sharing a beer with y'all, and very much looking forward to doing it in person. Please stay tuned for our events. Next one's coming up in December 9th as an in-person. We'll have to cap it off at 30 people, so please be sure to RSVP for that tour of the La Loma Community Center. But it's a pleasure joining you guys for an hour and a half, and thank you all for a great evening. So hope you all have a great rest of the night.
Thank you for having us.
My pleasure.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.